Hello, and welcome to Channel 143 News at 7, December 1st, 1793. I am Jackson Maffeo alongside my co-anchor Mike Pigeon.
This evening, we will be covering in depth the first 4 years of Washington's administration through interviews with his fellow colleagues and family, reports of the judicial and legislative branches throughout his first term, as well as an interview with Washington himself.
Over the past 4 years, George Washington has been in the first term of his presidency, the first presidency of these United States. Washington quickly proved himself to be a well-qualified and capable leader with integrity and great hope for this new country.
From forming the cabinet to the executive branch to the national debt and the formation of the National Bank, as well as the French Revolution, Washington's first term as President of the United States was filled with important decisions that had to be made and many challenges that this new nation has been facing. With the help of the judicial and legislative branches of government, fellow work colleagues such as Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, President George Washington has been able to gain the trust of his people and successfully lead the United States of America.
Joining us today is the President of the United States himself, President George Washington. Thank you for being here today, Mr. President.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. President, you've been a very busy president over these past few years, dealing with setting up America's government, the debt of our country, and the trouble with our allies in France. Would you care to elaborate on your first term as president thus far?
Of course, I have to admit, it's been very challenging leading this new country and living up to the expectations that the American people have placed on me. I understood the responsibilities of this job when I took office, yet I had no way of knowing what awaited me in my first 4 years. Dealing with issues such as national debt, forming the cabinet, and the French Revolution have been challenging, but I know that someday this country will benefit from the hard work we are doing to get this country to a successful state.
One of the hardest things you've had to come about in your first term has been the issues you have been dealing with in France. Tell me, how are you and the government dealing with this situation?
Well, at the beginning of the revolution in France, my colleagues and I supported the French in the fight for liberty and freedom because we just gone through the same thing against the British. We were happy to hear that a republic was formed in France, but things took a turn for the worse when the king was beheaded and the reign of terror had erupted. Violence was spreading throughout the country and very quickly. A war had started between the French and British. Our government faced a hard decision whether to support the French in the war or to stand by and watch our allies who had so generously helped our country defeat the same enemy. Our government was torn. Federalists, including myself, John Adams, and Alexander Hamilton, wanted to keep ties with the British and restore trade with them to support our economy, while Republicans such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison wanted to support the French in their fight against the British, who they truly considered enemies. I finally decided that it would be in the best interest of our nation if we did not interfere with the war overseas, because it was too expensive and it was essential that we start building our nation and economy.
Mr. President, I commend you for the work that you've done, and may I say I agree with your decision. I believe it was an effective decision that you made, and it will in turn benefit this country. Making decisions like that requires a use of effective leadership. So let me ask you, how do you lead this country in such an effective way?
In order to have effective leadership, I believe you have to be confident in your decisions. I've tried to be as confident as possible when making my decisions, and I could not have done it without the support of the American government, including the legislative and judicial branches. The role of our government is to work together to create an effective and stable society and uphold the Constitution of the United States.
Mr. President, it has been an honor speaking with you. Thank you for your time. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Jackson. Joining us today is a well-known Thomas Jefferson, who is currently the head of the State Department and will be discussing the formation of the cabinet. Good evening, Mr. Jefferson.
Good evening to you, too. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Jefferson, George Washington has really been involved in building an effective government, and he has done so by creating this cabinet. Would you care to elaborate on what this cabinet really is?
Yes. Well, at the beginning of Washington's first term back in 1789, the cabinet was established, and it was made up of a group of federal leaders who headed the major departments of the executive branch and advised the president. These major departments include the State Department, Treasury, War Department, and Attorney General. All of these departments play an essential role in the government and ensure that the government operates smoothly.
Seems like a very effective way of running a government. Would you care to share your personal opinion on it?
Absolutely. Well, even though I am part of this cabinet as the head of the State Department, I do have my criticisms towards it. Some of the members of the cabinet, especially. In all honesty, Alexander Hamilton and I have not gotten along too well as of late. We have been arguing about war debts and how we should deal with them, and personally, I do not agree with him, even though we have both happened to be Democratic Republicans and part of the anti-administration party. I strongly disagree with the idea of this national bank that Hamilton is leading because, in my eyes, it is undemocratic and corrupt.
As you have already stated, you are the Secretary of State for this country. Would you mind briefly discussing the responsibilities and what you have done as head of State Department during Washington's current first term of office?
Of course, being the Secretary of State is a much less glamorous job compared to the President, but I have been very occupied lately. It is my duty to attend to foreign affairs as well as affairs in this country. Recently, I have been working to get the British to leave their posts in the Northwest, trying to compensate for the slaves that have been freed by their slave owners, and also holding the British responsible for violating the Treaty of Paris. So as you can see, it is a very demanding job and essential part of the
Thank you
cabinet.
very much for your time today, Mr. Jefferson. And we now go to our reporter, Josh Lyman, who recently spent time with Alexander Hamilton, talking about the national debt this country is facing, as well as his role as head of the Treasury and the role of the new national bank. Good evening,
Thank
Josh.
you, Mike. I recently caught up with Alexander Hamilton, and this is what he had to say on these important topics. Mr. Hamilton, this country is facing a very troubling crisis. We are in debt nationwide. Can you tell me more about this debt and how the government plans to deal with it?
Currently, our national debt is about $52 million. The debt has extended to each individual state, and many states are individually in debt up to $25 million. As you can see, these debts are very steep, and the United States government is working very hard to pay it off as quickly as possible.
Mr. Hamilton, you are the Secretary of the Treasury. How are you advising the government on how to make up for these expensive debts?
To deal with these debts, I have personally, with the help of my superior, George Washington, created tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods. The tariffs will be created a steady revenue for the U.S. and will in turn protect the manufacturers of the United States. Government bonds and the welcoming of investors to sell these bonds is also a way that the country will overcome the debts, because income for a country will be increased, and it is my goal to strengthen the heart of our economy, the manufacturers.
What a relief to hear that there is a working plan to get rid of this horrifying debt. Lastly, could you tell me a little bit about the National Bank?
Yes, well, the National Bank was the request to Congress to charter a bank of the entire United States, which would regulate every state's individual banks, strengthen the national government through building revenue, and control the national spending. The goal of this bank is also to ensure businesses throughout the country have working relationships with the government, because I believe it is important for these businesses to be united with the government, because it is an efficient way of strengthening the U.S. economy.
Hamilton definitely has a strong plan to overcome the national debt, and as the Secretary of the Treasury, he has proven to be a strong leader, taking change in the debt crisis and the formation of the National Bank. I am Josh, reporting live from the Channel 143 News headquarters. We will be back with more news after the short commercial.
Hello, my name is George Washington. I'm the President of the United States of America, and I'd like to keep my title for the remainder of the second term. You trusted me to beat the British, so why wouldn't you trust me to run this great country again? Throughout my first term, I have achieved many accomplishments regarding the United States. Although I do support the French Revolution, I decided not to join the cause because we did not have the resources. I also set up the cabinet, which handled the major departments of this great nation. Along with the setting up the cabinet, I also created a national bank. With all this success in my first administration, why not let me have another term and have even more success? Do you do what's best for the country and vote me for president?
Channel 143 News. President Washington's first term as Commander-in-Chief has been fairly successful, but none of it would have been possible without the support of the judicial and legislative branches by his side. The legislative branch is made up of the Congress and the Senate. This branch of government helps run the government and assists making important decisions and votes for the country. The judicial branch is also another essential part of the government. This branch provides for the law for the government and is made up of the Supreme Court, which presides over many important government matters. Although these two branches have been playing their part to get this country up and running, President Washington has been avoiding interfering with how they are run. I have investigated his relationship with his partners in the government, and it seems that he does not want to dictate or influence the ways in which they operate. The president has showed that he does not want to interfere because he has devoted very few bills sent to him by the legislative branch, even when it is clear that he has disagreed with them. All three branches of the government have been working diligently to attain a state of success in this country.
To wrap up our news today, we will be interviewing First Lady of the United States, Martha Washington. Martha, thank you for being here.
It is an honor to be here, sir.
Martha, tell us, how does it feel to be the First Lady of the United States?
It's been quite an experience. It is surreal to think that my husband's the president of this great country, but it's rewarding nonetheless.
How have you been involved in your husband's first term so far?
When George took office, I knew that I had to support my husband and become involved with the ongoing issues in this country. I've hosted dinners at my husband's camps. I have been managing the presidential household and supervising the domestic affairs that take place from my home, Mount Vernon. And let me tell you, it is no walk in the park. I have also initiated a weekly reception for my members of Congress visiting dignitaries and people of the weekly community at the presidential residence. This job may not be the most popular, but I believe it is a job that is necessarily, and I am working hard to make a difference in this country.
Well, Mrs. Washington, that is all the time we have today. I appreciate you spending your time with us, and the country appreciates the work that you're doing currently for them as well.
My pleasure, sir.
That's all the time we have today, folks. I'm Mike,
And I'm Jackson.
and this has been Channel 143 News at 7.
Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 o'clock.